Is ignorance a prison of its own? We were educated but not informed about the system that defines modern America, one built on a foundation of incarceration, a system carved quite literally from the earth itself.
In 1773, Connecticut repurposed an abandoned copper mine into a prison. Prisoners were housed underground in suffocating conditions. Darker than night, colder than death. A prison with no sunlight, no fresh air. A living tomb where freedom and humanity were buried, never to be seen again.
Newgate definitely laid the foundation for our current criminal justice system and incarceration specifically. So it was the first state prison. They're exploring what that means. They're exploring what those concepts are, and more importantly, what the infrastructure looks like. So they thought an abandoned copper mine would serve as a good place to house men, and later determined that that wasn't the case. So they built structures, they built cells, cells that would hold 20 men, not necessarily one or two.
The United States holds more prisoners than any nation in the world. But despite 12 years of formal education before university, we learn almost nothing about the history of our prison system.
Which Newgate, being the first state prison, has a right to talk about. We have a right to look at this system from 1773 to now, because it still exists. There's some areas of history that have really faded out of the public eye, but incarceration is still very much here.
If we aren't taught about it, how can we ever change it? If we don't understand the roots, how can we dismantle the branches that still stretch across our society today?
Given how little we initially understood about this, Joey and I decided to take matters into our own hands, dedicating ourselves to learning as much as we could. Through our research and our effort, we uncovered valuable insights, and now here's what we've discovered.
From the very beginning, incarceration was about more than punishment. It was about profit. Prisoners became a commodity, free labor, fueling an industry that would rise in the shadows of human suffering.
So they're making nails and shoes at Newgate to sell and make a profit. It doesn't really work. It wasn't able to sustain the prison, but that was the attempt. And so today there's these systems, and I don't know the intricacies of them. I know there's a nuance between education programs and actual labor, making things for very cheap.
As the system evolved, private companies began to see prisoners as an opportunity to profit from the backs of those confined. By the 19th century, prison labor had become a linchpin in the nation's economy, creating goods for private companies and later industries. This would set the stage for the vast, privatized prison industrial complex we now have today. In the decades following the Revolutionary War, something profoundly alarming happened. As enslaved people were freed, incarceration rates for Black Americans surged. The promise of freedom for Black people was undermined by an insidious reality: the prison system, which had once been reserved for the poor and criminal, was quickly evolving into a mechanism of control over the newly freed Black population.
We see the number of Black men specifically, or just non-white men specifically, rising in their incarceration rates as gradual emancipation is occurring. So as more men and women are being freed and leaving enslavement, there's a higher number of those that are incarcerated.
Slavery didn't end, it evolved. The prison system became the new means of control, a tool for racial subjugation under the appearance of justice. The rise of convict leasing programs, where imprisoned Black men were sold to private companies to work in harsh conditions, marked a dark chapter in this evolution.
The concept of prison labor became central to American incarceration. From Wethersfield to the Auburn system, prisons were not just about confinement, they were about industry. From sewing garments to constructing railroads, prisoners were used to fuel an ever-expanding industrial empire.
Today, private prisons are multi-billion-dollar industries, fueled by policies that disproportionately incarcerate the poor people of color. The echoes of Newgate still haunt us. The cycle of profit-driven incarceration continues, expanding exponentially with the help of our private companies and prison lobbyists. The prison system has become a market, one that thrives on human misery.
But what if we told you that removing prisons can actually reduce crime?
Study found that when juvenile detention centers were shut down, crime rates didn't rise. They fell because communities invested in education, housing, and mental health services, support, not incarceration. It turns out that the path of safety isn't paved with more jails, but with more opportunities for youth.
Prisons do not need to be closed off from society. They don't need to be hidden away. They very much impact us and could impact any one of us more drastically at any given time, whether it's a family member or ourselves that are involved in the justice system. So basically, I think that you can't take any, in America, any major social justice movement and not think about prison as it relates to it, whether it's racism or poverty or anything in between. They tie into the justice system. And so I think that we just have a we have a responsibility to think about those issues and how they ultimately end up.
Old Newgate is more than a ruin. It's a reminder that prisons don't just hold people, they hold history. And they hold us accountable for what we choose to do next. The choices we make today will shape the future, just as the choices of the past have shaped the present we know now.
If we want change, we have to start with knowledge. Because if we never learn about the system, we'll never have the power to change it. It's not just about reforming prisons. It's about changing the very system of injustice that created them in the first place.